Welcome to Your College Bound Kid,
podcast for parents and families everywhere.
Whether you have kids that plan to attend college or you have current college students, you want them in and you want them to graduate.
You want a quality education that exposes you to people you would never meet if you never went to college. I am Mark Stucker, and I'm a college coach.
And I'm Anika Madden, and I am a parent. It is Thursday, June 20th, and welcome to episode number 73, What Applicants with Disabilities Should Know. In this week's news, how to rank college ranking sites. And we're in chapter 73 of 171 answers, and we're talking about the questions that students with disabilities should be asking in the admissions process. And Mark covers the questions that still remain unanswered and the controversies around the environmental context dashboard. And Mark is in his final part with Dr. Josie Urbestando in preparation for the personal statement, part 3.
Anika, do you remember when you and I took that trip to Brunswick, Georgia with Shaw?
Ooh, flashback. Yeah.
Flashback. Remember that?
Yes, I do.
We were meeting this big, wealthy tycoon investor, and he treated us to steak dinner, and he was going to invest in some stuff. Well, I'm going to Brunswick on Friday.
Oh, nice.
First time since Joy's there for the summer.
Oh.
So she's working at a camp. She's counseling at a camp there. It's like a Christian camp, and she's doing counseling there, working with like middle and high schoolers.
Oh, nice.
She's actually on like St. Simon Island. She stays on the island, but then they come into Brunswick, into the town for the camp. So I'm going to go down and be with her for Father's Day.
Nice.
Excited about. How's that?
Fanciness.
Cool? But I just had that flashback because I'd never been to Brunswick other than the time that you and I went. You and I and Shaw went. That was like, 2015, I think.
Yeah, that was the last time I went, and probably the last time I'll ever go back.
Was the trip that bad?
No, it's just I'll never go back.
Told me it was that bad.
It was not. Just not going back.
Okay. Just trying to see if I need to read something through the lines on that trip.
No, it was awesome. It was awesome. I remember that.
All right, so back to our countdown, and we're pretty soon we're going to need a new countdown, Anika.
Are we?
We're getting down here.
Okay.
We are counting down for our first-time listeners. 9 jobs that are growing at a super fast rate that pay a median pay of at least $75,000 or more. And number 9 was operations research analyst. Number 8, information security analyst, tied for number 8. Physical therapist. Number 6, genetic counselor. Number 5, mathematician. And number 4, software developer.
I thought that'd be number 1.
Software developer. Well, it's up there. So software developers are the creative minds behind computer programs. Some develop the applications that allow people to do specific tasks on another device. Others develop the underlying systems that run and control the devices. Many software developers work for firms that deal in computer systems design, manufacturing, or for software publishers. How do you become a software developer? Well, you need a bachelor's degree in computer science, and you need strong computer programming skills. Now, the median salary for the software developers with the applications is $103,620 as of May 2018. The median annual wage for the software developers that work with software, particularly, is $110,000. And for one of them, the growth rate is 24%, and the other is 31%. What are your thoughts on software developers, Anika?
I think they're awesome. And like I said, I figured they'd be number 1. So can't wait to hear the next 3. No, I love it.
Well, now I have to say something. Because you remember the first 3 or 4 episodes, I was like, don't be planning John and Janae's career. I've already said that a million times.
I'm still doing it. I mean, it's not out loud.
Not that you listen to me.
Correct.
Well, this is what I want to say this time. I want to say that I think it's phenomenal that you, a working mom, get together every week with me to record this podcast to help people all across the world and college counselors, parents, students, and that you're thinking about how you can apply this stuff to your kids. So I half joke with you. I half joke with you because I do want you to let it be their decision. but I commend you for always looking for opportunities for your kids. So I just want you to know, like, I'm probably one third joking and 2/3 impressed that you care enough about your kids to put this time in every week. So I just want to on the air say thank you.
No. Oh, you're so sweet, Mark. And I am 3/3 still doing whatever I need to do. Get these kids thinking about what they need to be doing. How about that?
Awesome. Let's turn to college hot topics in the news.
All right, Mark. This week's article, How to Rank College Ranking Sites. Lordy B. This is found in Forbes, written by Mr. Will Dix. We've done an article about Will Dix before.
We have, but this is my favorite one that we've done of all his articles.
Oh, really?
I think it's our third article. But yeah.
Oh, okay. That's
I think it's the third time we've had Will Dix. Yeah, but I like this my favorite that he wrote. Anyway.
Well, it highlights the fact that there's a huge market for college rankings, and he pretty much goes on to list and describe what I presume he believes to be the top 13 ranking sites. Which was actually pretty cool because he did a good job of outlining the focus for each of the lists. How each of the rankings places their focus on the colleges that make their rankings. I guess I think I said that right.
Well, I would say what criteria what he looks at is what criteria they use to.
Yeah, exactly.
Like how their formula. He doesn't get all into the nitty gritty of their formula, but he'll say, for example, Kiplinger and Forbes and Money Magazine, they look a lot at ROI and the cost of college and salary, right? And U.S. News focuses on prestige and selectivity. And anyway, go ahead. I mean, cut you off.
No, keep cutting me off. No, but I mean, I think it's just, for those that want to know life outside of the U.S. News and World Report rankings, that's the one that people always, the go-to for this. This would be a great guide to follow. So, Mark, I just feel confidently that you have some cautioning words for our listeners before they go in and read this article and start reviewing these sites. So, what else you got?
Many words, but on this topic, you know me, but I have a lot to say. But I love his opening paragraph, which I want to read. It's college ranking list time again, and everybody but those who make them will lament their effect on students and parents trying to make informed decisions about which colleges to apply to and attend. I'm one of those who don't put much stock in rankings, no matter how scientific they are, since the imponderables of college are too great to measure meaningfully. And with students themselves being one of the top imponderables, no matter what the list says, any indicators of value or success or employability will be strictly based on generalities, not realities. You go for it. May your tribe increase. Like, I could not have written that better. So I just really love that he said that. But what I liked, and this is the mindset that he has, which I have developed. I used to just rail against the rankings, Anika, and then I realized, wait a minute. Everybody's looking at them anyway, so how can maybe I better teach people how to use them responsibly? And I feel like that's really what he does in this article, which I really, really liked. And so, but before I really go into shedding my thoughts or sharing my thoughts, I can't help it, and I have to have my little diatribe against the rankings. I have to, and then I'll get into how they can be used responsibly. So I've been thinking about this. I have two illustrations about the rankings, and you're always good at giving me honest feedback. So I'm going to share each one with you, and I want you to rate the illustration whether it works or not. Tell me that. Give me a 1 to 10, whether okay.
Okay.
So the first one is this. Let's say you're looking at the best pizza. So-and-so is the best pizza in the city. It's the best pizza in the city. All right. I would argue that someone can claim they have the best ingredients. They may have the freshest, I don't know, I've never made pizza before, but, fresh is what? Green, what do I need my toppings on pizza? I'm going to want pizza after this. Fresh is onions and tomatoes and the best sauce and all that. And then you could have like the freshest ingredients. But in order to say what the best pizza is going to depend on individual person's taste buds, right? Because you might like red sauce and I like white sauce. You might like anchovies and I despise them. You may be a vegetarian and I like meat. And so that's a lot like the rankings. Like you can have rankings in individual categories, like schools with the lowest class size and schools that have the most name recognition and schools that graduate kids the fastest and have the highest SAT scores and make the most amount of money. But when you attempt to put the whole thing together and therefore say, therefore, this school is number 17 and is better than this school that's number 9, you can't do that because like pizza, different people have different taste buds. So that's why composite overall rankings don't work, but rankings in individual categories do. What do you think? Give me a ranking. Tell me that if that illustration was a dud, it was a 0, 10, a 3, a 6. No,
The fact
I need your honesty.
And I'm going to give it to you because the fact that you use pizza, I mean, you bought it home, but you did start out with pizza. So I'm going to have to give you like a 5 on that.
Oh, okay. Is that because I picked some food you don't like?
Well,
or
you
because
just
I fumbled around on my ingredients?
Yeah, you just went through a lot.
I couldn't think of any fresh ingredients.
It's all good.
All right, so that's a 5 out of 10.
Yeah.
Well, 5 out of 10 is 50%, which is an F. So that one was a dud. Okay. So let me see if I can do better on this one. That's okay. I want your honesty. You know, when you ask Anika for honesty, you're going to get it. So I need to get rid of my pizza illustration. Okay, so here's my second one. And don't be feeling sympathy for me. If it's worse, give me a 2 or 3.
Okay.
All right. Rankings. Here's my next one. Rankings are like churches or houses of worship. You can't really say this is the third best church in the United States because you may like praise songs and I like traditional hymns. You may like gospel music and I like contemporary. You might want a multicultural church in the city and I might want a homogeneous church with people like me in a rural community. But you can rank churches in individual categories. You can say this church is the largest in America. This church has the biggest budget. This church gives away the most money to foreign missions or has the most small groups. And that's like the college ranking. So you can say things like, I won't go through the long list, but all the things in college where you're the best in this category, but then turn around and say you're number 19 would be like saying you're the 19th best church in America. Totally subjective. Rank that illustration 1 to 10. Did that work or was that a dud or more of a dud?
I will give you a 4.5. You did bring it home.
It's worse. It was worse.
I mean,
I need a better illustration. It didn't work. It's not working for you. Not the church. The church one didn't work. I thought it was so good. When I say to people, you can't rank. Let's just move on.
Let's just work our way on back over to that.
Okay, with my little bruised ego, I'll keep on moving.
Oh, my goodness gracious.
So the point is, I believe you can rank schools in individual categories, but when you attempt to put the whole mix together, that's when you get in trouble. So is there a responsible way, though, to use cumulative rankings? Not just individual rankings. That is the question. Now, one of the dangers of rankings is one of the reasons why I believe test scores are so powerful is because the way our minds work is our minds are drawn to numbers. And when we hear a number, it tends to overpower subjective things. It just is. It's just the way our minds work, which is one reason, by the way, I think having a disadvantage score in the ECD is going to have some impact because of how the mind works. So that's the danger of rankings, is that people have a tendency to not be able to put them in context. Making sense so far?
It is. Mm-hmm.
All right. So can it be done? Can somebody do it? So I believe, yes, you can do it, even that it's hard. I remember a student I worked with about 17 years ago, and he can name Ben in Pennsylvania. Of course, I lived there then. And, he knew, he was like, look, I don't believe that number 8 is better than number 38, but I think that probably the top 50 are all pretty good. So I'm going to focus on the top 50. Now, that's one way to do it. You're still going to miss diamonds in the rough, because if the formula is not including things it should include, there won't be schools on your list that you should look at. But that's better than believing that number 13 is better than number 29. Say, okay, if you're like in other words, looking at them in tiers, right? Like if you're in this top tier, then maybe there's something you got going for you. So that's one approach. It's not the best, but it's a lot better than what most people do. Now, by the way, I'm persistent. I'm stubborn, right?
On
And
what?
I'm over. I'm over 2 on my little illustration. So I'm going to try a third one to see if I can redeem myself. I am.
Oh Lord. Okay.
I did. And I like to use. I like to use illustrations with boyfriends and girlfriends all the time when it comes to college. So
and those are the better ones, by the way. Those are the better
good.
ones.
Maybe I'll get more than a 5 this time. Maybe I'll because 5 is 50%, which is an F. So here we go.
Go for it.
So I used to just decry their rankings, and it was my hobby horse, and I couldn't get off it because their formulas were so subjective, and people would put so much stock in them. But as I said a couple episodes ago, I understand the public understands that colleges are not equal, which is true. And they also understand that, of course, if I visit a college, they're going to tell me it's great. So they look for outside substantiation. So one day I got liberated. I got emancipated because there was all this spate of all these new rankings that all emerged. For those of you who don't know, U.S. News was the first one to jump into this industry in 1983. And everybody said, no, you can't do that. It's like ranking churches. It's like ranking doctors and all kinds of things. Like, it's so personal. But after a while, they were making so much money that people basically said, well, you know what? If you can't beat them, join them. So we'll come up with our own ranking. We'll just have a better formula. And what I realized is that actually presents an opportunity. All these different rankings present an opportunity to make the case of how subjective they are. So here's my illustration. Let's say you're a high school kid and your school comes out with who they name is the most beautiful girl in the school and the most handsome guy in the school. And then they just act like it's fact. The whole rest of the year, they say, oh yeah, go meet with the most beautiful girl in the school. Like, you have a meeting with like the most handsome guy, like just like it's fact. And it's just, and this is really bothering you because you're like, you can't do that. This is wrong. So you commission your own study and you say, I'm going to have 15 different people, teachers, administrators, whatever, students. And we're going to pick the best, 15 most attractive women in the school and 15 of the most handsome guys in the school. And you go and you do your study. And guess what? Everybody comes back with a different answer as to who the most beautiful girl and the most handsome guy is. That's how I see the proliferation of rankings now. They're actually really helpful because when people look at them, they'll realize, oh, how come you're number 6 over here and you're number 64 over here? And so it makes the case for me.
Okay.
So how did that girlfriend-boyfriend one work? Did it get more than a 5 or am I going backwards? Am I down to 4?
Mucho better. I'll give you a 6 on that one.
Oh, you know what? If you ever become a college professor, I'm not taking your course.
Don't worry about me ever doing that.
You'll flunk out the whole class. 60 in my book, 69 is an F, so 6 is 60%. FFF. At least I'm going in the right direction.
Progress is the name of the game.
Yeah, maybe I'm up to F. I'm up to F+.
We would like to thank every listener who has financially supported our show.
We want to make sure that our friends of the show know that you absolutely can make a one-time gift, or you can sign up for one of our monthly giving levels. Recently, we received a lovely letter from a college counselor who made a gift and said she wants to support the show quarterly, and that is also okay.
And if you make a one-time gift or a quarterly gift, you may still be entitled to the same benefits we extend to our monthly donors.
That's right. For a gift of $60 or more within the first 12 months, you'll get all the benefits we provide in our Sustainer plan. And a gift of $120 or more in the first 12 months, and you'll get all the benefits we offer in our Expander plan.
So to support the show, all you have to do is go to yourcollegebounkid.com and click the donate button. Either click the monthly gift tab or the one-time gift tab.
And be sure to visit our frequently asked question page, which is also located at yourcollegebounkid.com for more details. This is also where you can learn about the Sustainer plan and the Enhancer plan.
Your financial support helps us defray the sizable expenses that it takes to deliver all of this great content that is aimed to empower you and your family's college admissions journey.
Different people have different abilities to give, but whatever you can contribute will be greatly appreciated and it will allow us to remain commercial free. So thank you in advance.
Thank you.
So let's take a look at how this can actually work for you and put it in context. So I have found if you are going to use the rankings, this is my advice. First of all, understand there's some embellishment. We did a whole article on that, and you got people cheating and trying to, embellish the rankings to do that, right? So understand, do not take it as gospel, because schools figure out how to game the system and how to present the information in the most winsome way for them. So understand that, first of all, there's a lot of stretching of the truth, sometimes subtle, sometimes overt. That's the first thing. Secondly, very important, if you're going to use the rankings, study the formulas. Study the formulas. Like you alluded to those formulas before a little, Nico. We just touched on them when we were talking about the different rankings in this article, right?
Mm-hmm.
The formulas are drastically different. Case in point, if you look at Forbes, in Forbes ranking, they do not have any inputs, only outputs. What do you think I mean by that?
I don't know.
So inputs are things like SAT scores, acceptance rates, right? Like a lot of the rankings are based on things like that. Outputs are things like interviewing people about how positive their experience was. Like it's more like results, right? Outputs are like results, where inputs are like criteria that you put into your little formula.
Okay.
And so, yeah, so study their formulas. Washington Monthly, totally different formula than the others. They look at social mobility. They look at, are you moving people? They believe that education is supposed to be. So a lot of people believe, Washington Monthly, that colleges and universities are supposed to be engines of social mobility that you improve society when you move people from lower to middle, upper class. And so they look at colleges through that prism. Are they moving people along the socioeconomic spectrum? That's something that a lot of the other rankings don't factor in at all. How much focus is put on test scores and acceptance rates versus income versus student satisfaction? What's the method? Is it a survey method? Is it a statistical method? First thing I would say is study the formulas and look at ones that you agree with. So I would absolutely say study the formula, because if you're going to take something and put a lot of weight on it, I think you should know how they're coming up with their list. You really will find that. I mean, case in point, Anika, if you take a look at two rankings in this list of 13, both that look at a lot of financial criteria in who they use. Money Magazine, right? They have 727 schools in Money Magazine. And they look at a lot of ROI data, 22 data points, and look at financial aspects, things like alumni earnings and family borrowing and all that stuff's in their formula. And then you look at Forbes, which also focuses a lot on financial stuff as well. But they look at 650 schools instead of 727. 77 colleges are on Money's list that are not even on Forbes at all. Didn't even make 650. So that just shows you how you can be all over the place, which, by the way, is what I love about these rankings now. They help make my point of subjectivity. So look at the formulas, but I also realize that there's going to be someone that's going to be like, I'm not looking at any darn rankings formula. I mean, I will advocate for this, but
that would be me.
I know that there are people, and you're not alone. You're not alone.
I know.
So even that I say, look at the formula, knowing that a lot of people won't do it, just like I used to say, don't look at the rankings, and knowing everybody did. So now this is what I'll say. Third point. If you're going to look at the rankings, don't just look at one or two or three. I'm going to say, if you're going to look at rankings, look at 6. Because this article has 13, but there are more than this in here. There are more rankings than just this.
All right.
So these are 13 of the more well-known ones. So if you're going to do it, look at a bunch of them, because that will really help you to realize that, I can't really say the school's number 5 because it's number 15 over here, it's number 47 over here, it's number 118 over here. It's based on their formulas. So that if you're going to look at them, look at a bunch of them. Now, when you look at a bunch of them, it will usually be true that a lot of similar schools will, emerge at the top. So there can be a way to do it responsibly. But next, don't let rankings make you lazy. You still have to discern whether it's a match or fit for you. If you're going to use them as one of your data points in your process, make sure they're one and not the main one. You're the one going. The way I look at rankings, Anika, is you're outsourcing your view of beauty to somebody else. And I'm going to say, don't outsource your view of what's beautiful to somebody else. And so
I'll take that.
And then I would say, once again, rankings in individual categories, there's validity there. If you look at things like who's got the strongest computer science program, who's got the most selective school, what school makes graduates make the most money, what school graduates graduate with the least debt, like those things are valid. And that's a responsible use of rankings, individual categories. But for the cumulative rankings, I will tell you, I do have a couple of favorites in these, and this is going to stun you what I'm going to say, Anika. Get ready for heart attack. Heart attack time. Heart attack warning. Do you know what if you are going to use rankings, do you know what one of my absolute favorite ones out there is? I've got two that I like more than the others.
What's that?
Just don't cut me off mid-sentence. So U.S. News, I think they have one of the worst formulas in their magazines, but they have an online, of course you got to pay for this one. They have an online version, and in their online version, it's like a do-it-yourself ranking. So like with that one, you get to decide how much weight you put on test scores or how much weight you put on graduation rates or college earnings. And you get to put all those factors in, and then it comes up with something for you based on that. It's still not perfect at all. It's still not even amazing, but it's better because at least you're basically controlling the formula. Make some sense?
Okay.
And then
a little bit, yeah.
A little bit? Yeah, because instead of somebody telling you how much weight they're going to put on the things, you get to decide, I want to put 30% over here and 10 over here, 15 here. And then one that I think does a really good job is the Princeton Review. And what they do is they survey 138,000 people in 62 categories, and they come up with the top schools. So they'll have things like schools where people study all the time, schools where people party all the time, that kind of thing. And it's based off of tabulating all of the surveys and seeing it comes out the most. And so they're not actually saying this school A is better than school B. They're just saying, you know what I mean? Like if you want a school that's got, let's say, schools that have the most athletic school spirit, I think that's a pretty good one. What are you thinking? What are your thoughts?
Two things.
Yeah.
For clarity's sake, where was the panic?
Where was what panic?
Are you...
Oh, me?
When you were saying, like,
don't have a heart attack?
I'm be stunned. Like,
yeah.
Exactly.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, because I'm always like excoriating U.S. News and World Report's rankings. But,
okay, you are giving some validity to
what I'm saying is their online one that lets you control the formula yourself is actually, to me, one of the better ones out here. And you don't usually hardly hear me say very many good things about U.S. News because their rankings have caused so many problems. I mean, literally, don't even get me started on all the problems. And literally, Board of Trustees changing their whole educational philosophy in order to climb up those rankings. So they've had such a deleterious effect. Yeah. And in other places, in other countries, people are not. A lot of the stress and anxiety kids have is over this ranking. So I have so many issues with them. But to know that I actually paid them a compliment. All right, what's your other point? But I see you still. I see you didn't have a heart attack. You survived.
Yeah, I did not. Okay. And so, but the moment of transparency, because I am struggling to put myself in the mindset of a person who really cares about those rankings. Like now, when you're using them responsibly, the only way I can consider myself going to a ranking is that, I want to be an engineer who graduates the best engineers. Like anything beyond that, I just cannot grasp the concept of why I care about who's studying more and who's not studying more at certain schools and all these different other whatever criteria, whatever that they're taking in. So I just totally am not relating to this because it's like, what else do we really care about outside of, okay, I want to be an engineer. Who's got the best engineers? Like, I'm just not there with y'all with this. I'm sorry.
So let me attempt to explain it. So if you want to be in an environment that's very studious, or you don't want to be in an environment where people are studying all the time, like, or there's others, like, for example, Princeton Review, one of their surveys is places that you have the most student-teacher interaction. So if that's important to you, and they surveyed 138,000 people, that's a pretty large sample, then that's a good place. It's a lot easier to find out that way than trying to go to every single school in the country and ask them at an information session, how much teacher interaction am I going to have if my kid comes here? Does that make sense?
It does, but
So in other words, people care about things. People care about things more than just who has the best engineer. Like there's certain cultures they're looking for. People that want the big athletic culture, that's important to them. People that want the fraternity scene. People that they don't want to be in big classrooms. Like people have other factors that matter to them in the type of dorms. Dorms are extremely important to a lot of people that I work with. And so, that's the kind of thing that, people care about. I think you're different than most people, if that's how you truly feel, Anika. There are other things beside who is the best engineer that matters to people because
I'm saying, I guess what I'm saying is the approach. Like, I don't see the rankings as an approach for that. I guess because we've never started with a wide net of schools, like, oh my God, we just randomly or maybe that's the difference is that we've always had, and I mean, I say it always like I have 30 kids, but I mean, there's always been a starting point of there's some schools that we have in mind based on what we think we want to do. And then we go about that process, not through the rankings, but we actually go about that through researching the school itself. Oh, going to visit the school. Oh, I don't know. The rankings just seem it just seems like the way to not approach that. I don't know.
I mean, I feel that way about overall rankings. I do feel there's a lot of really helpful information in individual rankings. And I'll say this, like, let's take U.S. News. U.S. News basically measures three things. They measure status, they measure wealth, and they measure name recognition and selectivity. So that's what they really matter. So status and name recognition, selectivity, and wealth. I mean, they look at all kinds of other things, but that's really what it boils down to. So if those are the most important things to people in their college search, then they're probably going to like the U.S. News rankings. I think another reason why this doesn't resonate with you at all, Anika, and I say this as a compliment, you're not a status conscious person compared to a lot of people. Like you're very comfortable in your own skin. You're not somebody who social climber, like you're trying to impress your neighbor with something with that's how I see you. And that's a lot of people are not that way. Like they are looking for the same type of validation they get if they drive a certain car, live in a certain zip code, have a certain profession. They look for that social status. And I've never known you to be that way.
Oh, well, thank you. And I'll take that. But wow, that's okay.
But I understand it because I think that basically what it boils down to is people know that colleges are not all the same, and they know that every college is probably going to tell them that they're good. So then how do I know which one's better than this one? And I think what you're saying is you probably trust either me. Remember, I've always worked with you to guide you and build your list of schools for kids. And so you've had me, and then you trust your own instincts when you visit the school and you have your own experience. So maybe that's why you're a little different. I don't know. What do you think? Is that a part of it? I don't know. I'm just guessing.
I think that's the most of it. It's that we've had Mark Stucker in our lives way too long to be worried about these numbers.
Hey, what do you mean way too long? What do you mean way too long? Is this like calling me creepy again? Because that might have been a Freudian slip. Way too long.
Not way too long.
Sound like a good thing.
We've had Mark Stucker for a long time, and that has clearly made a difference. That's all I can chalk it up to at this point because I am so far removed to what's going on in those rankings right now. It's ridiculous.
I'm gonna turn it into a positive. But when you say way too long, that sounds like you. That sounds like the company where they come over the cousin and you want them to stay 3 days and then they're like done day 30 and you're like, you were here way too long.
Take the way too out. Take the way too out.
Okay.
Sorry.
It's all good.
Not long enough, darn it. John needs you.
Yeah. Hey,
John needs you, Mark.
Hey, good old John is my insurance that you're gonna stick with your college-bound kid for the next 8 years, so you get all the knowledge.
Oh, you absolutely, you got it.
It's all good.
Now it's time for our step-by-step walkthrough of the college admissions process.
Okay, friends, we are in chapter 73 of a book I wrote, and the name of the chapter in this book is What Questions Should Students with Disabilities Be Asking? And this is the part of our podcast where we take a couple of the highlights from each chapter in my book and we talk about them. So, Anika, you've read the chapter. What are your thoughts?
Mm-hmm. Well, let me just say that, how I always say something jumps out at me
Yeah, I want to hear that.
when I'm reading this stuff. And well, it's not even that. It's just that I don't have a child with disabilities. So I get it. And I can say that these are thoughtful questions. I mean, they all make sense. They're pretty clear and direct about the things you need to consider. I will say that the point that you make about the American Disabilities Act puts it in place where these schools have to do certain things, but the quality varies.
Mhm.
And that's what's most important, is that you got to understand, how substantive, these accommodations are on these different campuses. But yeah, just that. And I'll just say, Mark, too, even in these chapters where, I don't have an undocumented student, I don't have a disability student. And this is where I see the value in this book, where it's just, man, it's helpful, just not us for our own children, but for our communities. And that's what's most impressive with me, Mark, with you and this 171 answers. And I'm just doing a shameless plug. I'm sorry. But it's such a tool for our own schools, for us to share with each other, where things aren't directly impacting us, but they are impacting our kids' peers, because they're just as important as our kids, because they're the ones that have to challenge each other as they're going about through all of this stuff. So kudos to you, Mark. Shameless plug for me and for you, because this book is just ridiculously off the charts in that vein, and I just need to share all that.
Well, that's nice of you to say that, Anika. And I don't want anyone to feel I'm doing this for the money. And so if anybody buys the book on Amazon, I'm giving all the money to the Atlanta Mission, which is a homeless organization. If people want to get it in larger quantities than just one book, like for a school or an organization, then they should go to 171 Answers, because you can get bulk rates and lower rates there. But I'm glad you like the book. I guess you probably would have cut the podcast off by now if you didn't. I'm glad you like it.
No. No, it's just that it's a resource guide. And it's just like, and when I do go through these things, it's like, oh, well, that, it's easy to skip over this stuff, but we got to remember that it's not just about us. It's about our kids and their peers and who they have to grow up with. And so this was a reminder to me of that. So
let me ask you this.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome. Let's get back to the content of this chapter. So I know you say you don't have a child with disability. Lots of people do. I want to ask you one thing you learned from this chapter you didn't know before.
Well, I'll tell you one, for example, the one that stands out is when you are questioning the resources on these specific campuses. One that stood out was that, okay, if I'm going to have someone that's dedicated, that's going to be an advocate for me in the form of a counselor, do I only have that person in the form of a counselor, or do I get that in addition to the traditional counselor that the other students have? I thought that was pretty important. There was another one that just slipped off my tongue, but that was, a perfect example of what I thought was good. It was thoughtful.
So I think one thing I'll say, you may not have kids with disabilities, but a lot of people do, because disabilities is a very broad term.
Oh, for sure.
Disabilities can be physical, which include things like speech, right? It can be hearing, it can be vision, it could be mobility, right? Wheelchair, crutches, it can be health, like diabetes, multiple sclerosis, cancer, heart disease, cerebral palsy.
Right.
It can be like serious things like food allergies, asthma, bad asthma. And it can also be learning impairments related to reading and math and writing and speaking. And it can be social interaction, and listening. So there's so many different types of disabilities.
Right.
And basically what we look at in this chapter is, how can me as a parent with a child with disabilities, how can I know how to evaluate whether a college is going to properly serve my child?
Right.
Because this is another, not to rail against the rankings again, but this is another example of the personalization, right? So when these rankings are done, are they looking at how good they are for you with your child with disabilities? Of course not. That's an example of why it's like custom work. So I can share some things, or do you want to share any other things that I said in this chapter that are ways a parent and a family can use to evaluate whether or not a school will properly serve their child?
No, you go ahead.
All right, I'll just hit a couple of quick points, and then we'll move on. Um, you know, and some of this I pulled off the research from a couple experts. Like to shout them out, that are really known as special consultants that deal a lot with disabilities. Joy App is one in Houston. She has a large part of her clientele is working with students with disabilities. And then Micah Goldfuss is an expert program director for Eye to Eye. He's an expert on assessing the quality of disability services in college. So I liked, and in the chapter, we include basically their best of their wisdom. But one of the things Micah said that I really liked is he asked 3 questions. 1, how does the Disability Service Office collaborate with other parts of the school, right? So is there a lot of intercommunication going on with the advisor, with teachers, with administration, with leadership, or is it an island unto yourself? Secondly, does the Disability Service Office provide mentorship opportunities? Thirdly, does the Disability Service Office train and communicate with the university staff, professors, and administrators? So those are some things that I think are important. I would also say this, and this is something that we've brought up before in our recommended resources before, that we have on every podcast, is the K&W Guide to College Programs and Services for Students with Disabilities and Attention Deficit Disorder. That's a great book to have, because what it does is it basically looks at about 300 to 350 colleges, and it assesses how much support they have for disabilities. And so I think that's a fantastic resource for people to have. Now, one of the points that Joy App brought up that I really liked, and she encouraged students and parents to look at when you're assessing a school, and I'll read this, and this is the last point I want to have, and see if you have any comments, and if not, we'll move on. So Joy says to be on the lookout for 2 red flags that she's learned over her years in evaluating campus disability services. 1, is the personality of the director or staff member off-putting? And she says this is paramount because who's ever running that department, their personality is going to be infused throughout the whole department. And if you're going to be working with disability services and the top dog is somebody that, you don't like the vibe you're picking up from them, then chances are the whole rest of the thing is not going to be good as well. And then the other thing that she points out is how good is the disability services website? Is it user friendly? Is it simple to navigate? Because you're going to be using that a lot. So those are a couple other tips. Any thoughts on any of those things, Anika?
Well, I wonder if any of these things, when it comes to families with kids with disabilities, if any of these should be considered deal breakers. Like, oh, well, if the person is off-putting and that it's going to trickle down, throughout the experience that your child is going to have, should that just be your absolute, okay, we just need to move on? Because because it's obviously a little more sensitive for you, right? You need to be cognizant of what the experience your kid is going to have on the campus. Do any of those weigh more than the other? I guess is the overarching question.
Well, I'll tell you one that weighs the most, and I didn't bring it up, and that is, if you have a child with disabilities, then you need to visit disability services on your visit. And when you visit, and you need to meet with one of the disability counselors. And when you meet with them, you need to find out very specifically how they serve your kid, what accommodations and resources and supports they have in place. And that's what you need to be doing, and to comparing that to all of your schools. And so, yeah, the K&W Guide is a good place to start, but you also need to do that on-site visit. You don't have to do it before you apply. You can apply and get in, and then once you get in, before you decide if you're going to go, you can do it then. But that, to me, is the most important thing is, and the website is going to be important because there's a lot of that's going to be on there. Probably going to get a real good sense by reading the services and, that are offered right there. But I also would add to the services on the website how the on-site visit goes and what you specifically learn. And that's going to be customized, right? Because with one person, their disability may be, they could be in a wheelchair, right? Another person, they could have dyscalculia, which is math issues, or dysgraphia, which are writing issues, or serious ADHD or significant food allergies. I mean, there's so many different ones. And you want to know what type of support will there be for my child and what does that look like? To me, that's the most important thing.
Okay.
Disagree? I know you don't have disabilities, but you got a brain and you're good at thinking.
No, I think and it makes sense. It just makes sense. You answer the question. It's just a matter of what do you feel like is going to accommodate your child the best? And that's what it boils down to.
Sounds good. It's time for a question from one of our listeners.
All right, Mark, this week we are wrapping up on the environmental context dashboard. And so I know, Mark, you want to just address some of like the remain, we did the definition, the for and against, and now here we are is okay, what's left after that?
Yeah.
Like what do we still have to work through as we work out through this pilot phase of this adversity score?
Yeah.
Environmental context dashboard is what we should be calling it.
Yeah. And the first thing I'm going to say, and again, we'll see maybe over time if I'm right. Like, I don't think you're going to find any other podcast or blog articles that's going to do a 4-parter on this. Like, I've spent a lot of time on this because I think this is a really, really, really big deal. And over time, we'll see how significant this is. But what I want to do in this one is share 12 unanswered questions, 12 things to look at over the next 3 to 5 years related to this ECD.
Okay.
And so what I want to do is I'm going to break them up into 3 sections of 4. And I'll read the questions to you in foursomes, and then you just tell me any comment you have on any one of the 4 that kind of stands out to you.
Okay.
All right. So the first question I have is, watch what Harvard, Yale, and the other elites do and say related to this. They're starting out with a pilot of 50. They're expanding to 150.
Oh.
But those schools tend to have a really inordinate voice in what happens in college admissions. So first thing is watch what the elites do because... keep in mind, if the elites can go to the college board and say, this is really important to us, and they're like, yeah, the college board gets their money by students and parents, but ultimately it's the colleges. If the college decides to drop them, then they're dead meat, right? So like there was fear and trepidation in California and with the college board some time ago, and they thought the whole University of California was going to drop the SAT. That's like a quarter of all of their students. So what the elites do matters. That's the first thing. Secondly, and this is a really big one. Okay. This is a really big one. Watch what the ACT does. Because, the ACT wars have been pretty intense, but I think this is going to take the SAT wars to a whole different type of level. So far, the ACT's chief executive, Martin Rorta, said she has no plans to launch a similar adversity rating. Rorta says she believes Coleman, the CEO of the College Board, has good intentions, but the College Board's action, according to Rorta, could tempt some people to try to use the new data to adjust SAT scores for socioeconomic circumstances, something you just cannot do. That's what basically, he said in an interview. So watch what the ACT does. That's really, really, really significant. If the ACT ignores this, will colleges start to, in other words, if they do what they say, like we don't plan on having this, right? Are the colleges, this is the third question, are the colleges going to start to have a preference? So far, the thinking with colleges has been, the rationale has been, do the ACT or the SAT, it doesn't matter, it's up to you. But if colleges feel really, really strongly about this, and the ACT doesn't come up with their own, are you going to start to see colleges say, we'll take both, but we prefer the SAT? That's something to watch.
Okay.
And then the last point I have here in the first one is, will this change how counselors advise students? So if you're a college counselor and you're working with a privileged kid, are you going to say, look, take the ACT because there's no disadvantage score in their environmental context dashboard? If you're working with a kid from a bad neighborhood and poverty and crime, are you going to say, take the SAT because they may take your background into context more? So any thoughts on any of those points?
Well, I'm most anxious about the ACT. How much time are you going to give them? What do you say, a year, 2 years? Give some kind of response about that? Response to it?
I think that unless the colleges come out and strongly indicate that this is something that they really, really want to see, I wouldn't surprise me if the ACT does, sticks to their current position and doesn't change.
Okay.
And doesn't offer anything like this.
Keep moving.
So
Keep moving.
So should I keep moving? Those are 4 questions I have so far. All right.
Okay.
So we'll keep moving. Next, I'm looking and I'm expecting some type of lawsuit over race because that's such a sensitive, sticky issue right now. And there are people that believe that the ECD is just an attempt to try to allow colleges to use race as a factor in admissions in case the Supreme Court overturns affirmative action. The ECD is much more than that. This is something that's looking at rural communities that are under-resourced and looking at them in their context. But I'm expecting a lawsuit to be filed, multiple lawsuits, probably trying to overturn it in certain places and say it's a backdoor attempt to use race. And so watch what happens legally along that. So that's something that I would say. Now, question for you, Anika. What do you think is the single biggest thing I learned in my 10 years I did college admissions or boarding school admissions that was eye-opening for me? What do you think?
Out of the billions of things that it could be? I'm going to let you go ahead and answer that.
Okay, that was a tough question, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Well, I will tell you, the single biggest thing I learned was how people's own life experiences, people meaning the admissions officers, determine who they advocate for in committee and how they read a file. So I have hundreds and hundreds of stories I could tell you of how the athlete in the college admissions office looks for athletes. The person involved in student government looks for student government. The dancer loves the dancer. The person who came from a rural community looks for people in the rural community. People don't even know that they do it. The admissions officer who aced the ACT or SAT was brutal on the kid who struggled with low test scores. Conversely, the admissions officer who had tepid SAT or ACT scores was very forgiving when a kid had modest scores. Personally, I loved charismatic kids who wowed you in the interview. I loved kids who walked into the admissions office like they owned the room. And I'm not proud of this, but kids who were flat, monotone, or what I would call charismatically challenged, I would refer to them as being dull as dishwater when discussing them in committee. It wasn't until year 4 of doing the job that I even noticed my own bias when another colleague pointed it out, and then I intentionally started to advocate for some more reserved kids. In fact, because most admissions offices by nature tend to be comprised of extroverts, after all, we need to be able to constantly make strangers feel welcome at college fairs, there can be a real bias toward extroverts in the hiring process. A few years ago, many admissions offices across the country were attempting to correct this bias that is created in file reading. So what they did was they had the whole admissions staff take on the summer project of reading Susan Cain's excellent book, Quiet: The Power of Introverts in a World That Can't Stop Talking. The seasoned admission directors know this tendency to look for someone like yourself is so ingrained that they make sure their admission office is comprised of such disparate groups of people in terms of backgrounds, interests, and other things to make sure that everyone's biases are checked and that each kid will have an advocate at committee who thinks like they do. And the same thing happens with hiring. Like, two people completely have different views on a file, oftentimes, desirability of a file, and how excited they get about a kid based on their own background. And I say all that to say that how the ECD gets implemented is going to depend a lot on people's backgrounds. If somebody came from a wealthy, affluent suburban school district and they felt like the deck is being stacked against them because there's such an attempt to try to swing the pendulum toward helping those who didn't have those privileges, that those kids are actually being hurt now in the process. Like a lot of college counselors, I'm in these different groups. That's a very common belief, in the groups that I'm in, that it's going to really, really, really hurt people in a way that's not fair. if that's your experience and that's your background, then that's going to be your attitude toward that. Just because the number's there doesn't mean that it gets included in your decision making. Remember you said that on our very first time, and I said, can we table that and come back to episode 4? You said that, Anika. You said just because it has a number doesn't mean that means that, that an admissions officer is going to put weight on that number,
right,
in their final decision. And so this is something to keep an eye on, is how people's personal backgrounds make them either an advocate for using the score or make them feel like the score is actually hurting people, not helping people. So that's something to keep an eye on. And then this is a huge thing, and this related to your question before about the ACT and what I expect. Look for pushback from the powerful. Like, you're talking about people with a lot of power, big donors, wealthy donors, the full pay families that fund these schools. I mean, these schools' entire economic model is based on, they can only take but so many disadvantaged kids and still pay their bills.
All right.
They really can. This is not something that's going to drastically overhaul their whole student body, because their financial model doesn't allow it to do that. But look for the pushback of the powerful. And I think the ACT is looking at this and saying, you know what? Most of the people with the power are people that feel like their kid may lose out now to another kid with less privilege. They're probably likely going to side on our side. So I'm expecting a massive all-out war between the ACT and the SAT. If the ACT takes its third position, I'm expecting an all-out war between more privileged families who already are doing every imaginable thing to get their kid in college. And a lot of them are going to feel like this is one more impediment at my kid getting into designer U. A lot of powerful people don't sit back idly and do nothing in those type of circumstances. So I'm looking for a massive power struggle. What do you think on that? Oh, I want to read one last thing before I say this. So this is interesting. This is actually a quote from an article. How will the College Board handle the private high schools, the consultants, the wealthy suburbs steering kids to the ACT? Will history repeat itself? The adversity rating is not the first systematic effort to give more context to the SAT. In 1999, researchers at nonprofit educational testing service, which administers the test, they proposed trying to quantify the difference between actual scores and expected score based on things like family income, parent education, and other factors, and giving 200 points extra to people from more disadvantaged backgrounds that they called labeled as strivers. Now, listen, the idea bombed. Then here's a quote from Anthony Carnival, who was working at the time. He said, "We got a tremendous negative reaction to this." He was, then at the time he was the ETS vice president, because this is the pushback of the powerful. And now he's director of Georgetown's University Center on Education and the Workforce. And here's what Carnival said. He says, "I applaud the College Board for this new measure, but man, is it risky." So I'm looking for the pushback from the powerful. And so any thoughts on any of those points?
Time will tell. Not in any of these, right?
All right. Yep. Last couple of points. Even remember before, Nika, and I read how a lot of schools are finding it's valuable, and the ones that are using it, they're part of the pilot study. So even them, they're saying it seems like it may be impacting about 2% of decisions. This is not something that's drastically overhauling who schools bring in.
Right.
It's, they're maybe taking 2 to 3% of kids that they're seeing, wow, look at the disadvantages this kid has and look how well they're doing. So how long is it before the College Board changes its mind about keeping scores private? We've talked about that. That's interesting to me. Keep an eye on that. Will attempts to game the system result in widespread abuse? In other words, will people try to move into a bad neighborhood or a bad school for 1 year to feel like they'll get the benefit of that? Or is that just something people aren't going to do? I don't know. It's just worth looking. Anytime you have systems in place that people can manipulate, there's going to be some fraud. Finally, the financial model of colleges keeps them from being transformational. So will the talk and the walk about this actually line up? So in other words, will this be a lot of lip service? Look at all the things we're doing. We're looking at holistic review. We're looking at background. We're looking at this environmental context dashboard. But in reality, it's not really making any difference because they can't afford to bring in these families that they have to give a lot of financial aid for, because they need the families that can pay in order to pay their bills.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something I'm watching. And then the last thing is, will this reduce the rate at which colleges go test optional? So now that that's one of the reasons the College Board did it, right? They kept having more schools go test optional because people said that the SAT is just a reflection of the education level of your parents and the income of your parents. It's just a measure of the zip code you live in more so than anything else. And so they said, well, no, what if we provide this other tool so you can use it in context? And part of why they were doing it is to stop schools from going test optional. And so will it stop the rate at which schools are going test optional? These are all questions I have that I think people that are really interested in this topic should be looking at over the last 3 to 5 years. Any thoughts on any of those?
No, I can't speak enough to time. Again, this is such the beginning phase of all of this. And I think, we all know that change, people are just innately opposed to change, period. If you think about it, this is just this is an improvement process for the College Board, an attempt by them. Who doesn't want to improve their system? Who doesn't want to improve their product? That should be, this seems like they're getting dogged for trying to improve themselves. And then, you talk about the lawsuits and, just people, you talk about people, trying to game the system and how, they might move into another neighborhood. How creative are people really going to get in terms of gaming the system? So it's just so much that can happen. Again, it's such the beginning, phase of all of this. It's just, let's be sure to talk about this in our final episode. That'll be like our hallmark.
Final is in final?
Yes.
Who knows when that will be?
Final.
Who knows when that? I may die first before that happens. Who knows? But one thing I will say this. I will say this. Of all the things that we talked about, the thing to me that is the most interesting of all of them is the ensuing war, I think, between the ACT and the SAT that I think is going to, is going to, be exasperated because of this. I think that's going to be fascinating. I think right now the ACT is, because I think both the College Board, they think this is the right thing to do, but they also think it's good for their business model. And I think the ACT feel it's good for our business model. We'll be happy to have affluent families that don't like this thing all take our test instead of your test.
Right. Let the bottom line numbers say what's going to happen next. How about that?
Lots of times it goes down to the bottom line.
And now, this week's interview with a special guest.
All right, Anika and friends of the show, we are in the final part of my interview with Dr. Josie Urbastando. And in part 3, I have a great conversation with Josie as we kind of compare notes between students she works with, students I work with, about common errors we see in student writing. We also talk about the importance of communicating values and showing emotional intelligence. And Josie exhorts listeners to start early on their personal essays. She shares various ways you can conclude your essay. And then, as always, with all my interviews, I put her on the hot seat and ask her some tough questions. And she made me laugh. I think you'll find it interesting and even entertaining. So listen and enjoy. I'm curious, because you do this, I do this. What are the most frequent mistakes that you see with your students when it comes to their writing, particularly their college writing? And let's focus on this main essay, because I know there's different types of writing, right? We're not talking today about school-specific essays, and we're not talking today about the additional information section or the discipline statement or any of that. Just their main essay that could be the coalition, it could be the Common App, it could be a school's own main essay.
So let's see. A couple. Okay. So number one, I think, is the telling a story about grandma or grandpa or the auntie. And I feel like and it's an amazing, incredible story full of hardship and obstacles. And I mean, it would have violin singing at the end because it's composed beautifully, right? But then the admission officer is going to read it and be like, okay, I want to accept grandma to Wake Forest, but I don't know about the student. What about Johnny? So yeah, so essays that don't come back to the student, like I want to learn about you.
Right.
And so you can definitely jump off of, a relationship that is formative to who you are and who you're becoming, but kind of give me that, not just about grandma or grandpa. So I think that's one. The sounding smart, like on purpose. So I want to sound like how I think a lawyer sounds. So no joke, I will see hitherto. It is evidenced by that I'm like, but we don't say hitherto. I mean, come on, let's be honest here. And then they all start laughing. And I'm like, okay, I get it. So let's reel that one back in.
Maybe someone's reading the King James Bible a lot.
Yeah. I mentioned the student kind of recounts this great story and then moves on to another point, and they don't pause or reflect or break down, kind of critically engage with their reader. And then the roll call, the listing accomplishments and telling rather than showing values and characteristics. I tell them that, but then I think it hits home when I explain it or point to like a line, right? So I am a hardworking and diligent student with strong family values. You're telling me, but you're not showing me that. I want to see that if that is what you want to talk about. So give it to me in an anecdote, in a story, break it down, tell me how and why you possess these traits so tell me how and why you possess these traits through your story and reflection. Don't tell that to me. Because I don't think it just kind of, it falls flat a little bit if you're just saying, I am this, I am that.
So I mean, once again, we agree. Like for me, it's the telling of this really, really interesting story. And then they don't get to what I call the so what. Like it's the so what. I try to tell them, like, an admission officer is looking at this as, how are you different than the last person that I read? And if it doesn't come back to you, it really falls flat. That's definitely a big one. The other one you said, the telling, not showing, all the time, right? I see that all the time.
Right.
That's definitely one. The other one that for me that I would add would be not enough about their background, not enough about sort of their, just who they are and how they've grown, their family, their upbringing, and how those forces in their life shaped who they are today. Those are some of the big ones. But
agreed. That last one, I can't tell you how many times I tell students, you are not your awesomeness self in a vacuum. Like this did not happen alone, right? So give me that. And we are innately just super, super nosy human beings. Like we are just nosy. So admission officers want to hear these stories and want to hear these kind of interesting dimensions to who you are. And so much of that can come off as just great family stories that some students think, oh, that's not too intellectual. But it can be if you give that so what that is so important at the end. Like, why is this a part of who you are, right? Why do you take this family story and this family kind of experience in all walks of your life? And why are you going to bring this to campus? Why that is important? That is what kind of ideally, and we didn't even talk about kind of, not only diversity of thought, but values and points of view, like how that enriches a college experience, because we don't want robots that sound and talk and experience the same way, right? Their first 18 years. We all want all campuses ideally want different students with a composite of different experiences. And so much of that is from identity. I love when students kind of dip into that.
Yeah, and another one I just thought of, it's kind of what we were saying, but it's maybe a little bit of a twist on it or different way of saying it, is an unwillingness to be vulnerable. So I find that students, they're guarded and they kind of write. It's sort of like, they come to you, they come to me, and they start with, what do they want to hear, right? So that's their mindset. Like, what do they want to hear? And so they write in that way where they feel they need to impress. And so that comes out in various forms. And one of them is, of course, the thesaurus, right? One of them is the need to score the winning goal, to make yourself look like a hero. But to me, a lot of it sort of falls in this fear of vulnerability, fear that if some of my humanity is exposed, it will make me less attractive. When a lot of times it will make you really memorable, and And I mean, also just an inability to sort of emotionally connect. But all these things are, of course, if you do them, they will emotionally correct, right? If you do the things we're talking about, they'll emotionally collect. But some essays, I read them and they're not even, they underestimate the power of those emotions and evoking those emotions, not in a manipulative way, but just in an authentic and genuine way.
Right. And I think, and it shows a sense of emotional intelligence and maturity that I feel more often than not, my students have. They just, like you said, they're kind of shying away from that.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's that unlearning. This isn't an academic essay where you are you have a thesis and you have body paragraphs and then you come back to your thesis. You are not an academic paper. So you have all of these interesting interesting kind of like little snippets and threads to who you are, and you are a composite of all of this messiness. And so yeah, I mean, to be vulnerable, and sometimes, and it's not to be generic, but sometimes I get a lot of that from students who are in a time crunch.
Yeah.
They have not allocated the time to stretch a little bit and think about this and come back to a topic and just play with one, then play with another, then maybe the essay is both those topics. They're hearing the tick-tock of a clock because the due date is like, I don't even want to say it, 2 weeks, something, something
right.
So, I mean, I love the fact that you are talking about this so soon, right? I mean, juniors, it's time. It's your time. And the Common App prompts are out, right? Because they didn't change. So you should start as juniors thinking about this now, not wait until kind of when you think you should start writing. You are living your life right now. So you are writing it. You just need to start documenting it.
There's so many aspects of the college process where procrastination will come back to bite you. It really is. I mean, writing, it certainly can apply to doing well in school, researching schools, certainly preparation for your standardized tests, all asking your teachers for recommendations at the 11th hour, joining extracurriculars really late, or uncovering what your interests are late. There's just so many of them, and writing is a big one. I do want to ask you about conclusions. What are some different ways that you've seen conclusions done that you felt were effective?
Let's see. I like the kind of framing device. So if they start with something, kind of bookend with a different point, but something similar. So it has a sense of like cyclicality to the essay.
Like bringing it around. Yep.
Yeah, like bringing it around, but you are kind of ending in a more mature, wiser place. So it kind of has the shade of that similarity, or it's like the second version of it's kind of the ending of that anecdote that you started with. I like that. I love dialogue. I love kind of having a sense of like the story is still being written. Like you don't have to kind of end it with a bow and now this is who I am, perfection, and I'm complete, and so here you go. So I like these like open-ended kind of grappling with kind of what tomorrow will bring. And sometimes I feel like that depends on whether or not, so like a lot of the ending sometimes depends on whether or not the student knows what their major, like what their ideal major may be, even if that changes. Sometimes students kind of will bring that in. I really like when majors kind of, when the anecdote that they're beginning with, and then they kind of talk about aspects of their identity kind of links into the major. And sometimes that happens, but that kind of is interesting. Yeah.
No, that's good.
I love kind of another short anecdote. Like it really kind of is a moment where I want to read the student exhale in a different place. So I want to know, it's less kind of what they're putting as their final sentence and more, have I seen a journey? And so the last couple lines are showing me that, I feel.
That's great.
Let's take a break to learn about Mark's recommended resource for the week.
The recommended resource for episode 73 is the Twitter account Saving for College. Now, the 4 is the number 4 and not FOUR. At Saving for College links outstanding articles to help your money go far, so college, and quite frankly, other expenses in your life, will be affordable. Here are the names of the articles they have linked so far in the month of June. How to apply for financial aid. Dual enrollment versus AP classes. Which college expenses qualify for educational tax benefits? Should I pay off my mortgage early or save for college? Student loans will cost you double. Some colleges have very high parent borrowing rates. How to choose a bank account for a new college student. Is there an income cutoff on eligibility for student aid? And how do state funding cuts affect tuition inflation? So friends, if articles on topics like these interest you, I highly recommend you check out the Twitter account at Saving for College. We will now resume the final segment of my interview with Dr. Josie. So let's close out with some hot seat questions. You've heard our podcast. You know I'm going to do the rapid fire round, and I'm not going to ask you the same questions I ask everybody because you kind of know what some of those are. So what do you like to do for fun?
I like to watch movies. I have a 4-year-old, so I can't go to the movies often. But when I do, I will have my popcorn, my chocolate, my Coke. I drink soda. Not often, but in the movies, yes. And so, yeah, movies, whenever I can.
Favorite sport?
I love stories.
Yeah, you're a story person. I shouldn't be surprised.
I am. Sport. Aha. Favorite sport is probably college football.
Whoa.
Because of my husband. I know. Because of my husband, I am a Hurricanes fan, right? But we haven't been, I love them, but we have been awesome for a while. Mm-hmm. But my husband went to Michigan. And so if I don't give him a shout out, he's going to get upset. And so he's a Tom Brady fan.
Oh, boy.
He was in the Tom Brady. I know.
No, I went to Michigan State. I went to Michigan State.
Oh, no.
Yeah, so this is just like,
there you go.
I'm not a Tom Brady fan. I'm allergic to the Wolverines. It's intense.
I hear you. It is the rivalries at Michigan, Ohio State, in-state, the Michigan game I went to a few years back.
Wow.
And they're just amazing.
Yeah.
It's just like storied rivalries that are just great fun. I love it. College football just lends itself to this like human drama that is fantastic.
That's awesome. So if you were not a college professor and writing coach, what other career would be interesting to you?
I think I would be writing advertising jingles and like sayings. I'd be in advertising. I love turn of phrases. Mm-hmm. I love like the play on words, and I laugh at my own jokes. And yeah, totally.
Cool. Favorite TV show?
Oh my goodness. Am I going to be a college professor and kind of impress you, or am I going to tell you the truth?
I'm going to tell you both. I'm
going to tell you both. Okay. Here we go. I love Game of Thrones. I really do. Mm-hmm. Let's see. I have a problem with Bravo and kind of Real Housewives. Like, it's a problem. Hey, I love them all.
It's your guilty pleasure. It's your guilty pleasure.
It is. It is. I know. Yeah, that's about it. HBO. I love everything HBO comes out with, basically, and Bravo. HBO and Bravo are my networks. Cool. There you go.
Best book or two you've read?
Oh my goodness. Okay, so this is serious business. I feel like it's going to be not interesting, but honestly, Gabriel Garcia Marquez, 100 Years of Solitude is probably one of my favorites. Let's see. The Aguedo Sisters by Cristina Garcia, Dreaming in Cuba by Garcia. Oh my goodness. Don DeLillo's Libra, Virginia Woolf's A Room of One's Own. I can go The Great Gatsby.
Okay, you are a college professor. You just rattled off 5 and I'm stopping you before you got to 10.
I'm such a nerd.
You'd have been at 10 if I just stopped. Great Gatsby.
That's it. I had to put that one in there. And I'm one of those weird English majors and professors who love movie adaptations. So that's a weird thing because I love to visually see it come to life, even if I may disagree creatively. But oh my gosh, I love it. I can't understand why people don't like them after they read the book. No, I don't get it.
So is there a book on college essays you like more than others?
You know, I like, and this is actually, I mean, I love Fisk Guide to Colleges, which is not on essays,
Right.
but it kind of gives us such a thorough snapshot
Mhm.
of so many institutions.
Mhm.
A lot of my students, and again, this is not my wheelhouse. Like
Right.
I come to the process with the essay,
Mhm.
but a lot of my students, I feel, um, are doing themselves a disservice when they are only applying to these like 7 name brand schools
Mhm.
they think that they'll be awesome at, and because all they know is the logo or the city or the college football team, right?
Yep.
So I feel like that's a great kind of resource. Love that book. And then I like, and this is not a college book,
Mhm.
but I like this compilation called In Short.
Mhm.
And I kind of share this with my students a lot. And it's basically a collection of creative nonfiction.
Mhm.
So it's like they're short stories of like a page and a half. And from a convention perspective, like how writers kind of dip into a narrative, they don't start from way in the beginning. They kind of start like at that climactic moment and then just dip in. So I like kind of teaching. Ideally, kind of, I'm a teacher at heart. So I don't only want to help students write these best essays. I really kind of, in a sneaky way, I'm trying to teach them how to kind of really think strategically about their writing and expression. And so I think those 2 books are fantastic for that.
So if students end up going to can they request your class, or do most freshmen end up getting you, or how does it work?
I mean, I'm a popular girl, let me tell you.
And
So,
and I have to say
so I
something. Let me
think
say something. I researched Josie on Rate My Professors, and she has extremely high ratings. So she is a popular girl. Like 23 out of 24 people gave you like 5 stars.
oh my gosh, but where's that 24th? I have to hunt them down. So I mean, so it's a funny process. I feel like most students, I mean, you know, I'm not famous yet, but most students don't know. They're just kind of picking kind of that first semester. They're just picking what fits in their schedule. So I get kind of for the most part, you know, strange new faces. And then I'll get a couple of those. I always get a few kind of stragglers that will stay with me. We're just holding hands for the whole academic year. And yeah, I mean, I don't see, I only teach because of the college work. I've been just kind of very fortunate that the business has grown. And so I've dipped actually to part-time position. So now I'm teaching a 2-2, where prior, you know, I was teaching 4-4, 4 courses a semester. Now I only teach 2 a semester. So I'm in
I'm glad you
demand in a
broke
good
down
way. I
that,
feel so
because
fortunate.
you were
I love
doing
it.
some little in-house college professor.
Did you see that? Did you see that?
In-house
I
college
know.
professor talk with the 2244 thing, but
And let me
you
tell
broke it
you,
down.
that's as much math as you got from me. That is it. Yeah.
So final 2 questions. I'm going to ask them to you at the same time in case you want to think ahead.
Okay.
Your best advice to students and your best advice to parents who are going through this process.
Best advice to students. Best advice to students is to enjoy the process as much as possible. If they allow the time, the essays, to kind of pause and have this moment to grapple with where they are right now, kind of assess, and then kind of idealize and dream and imagine who they're becoming, is such a beautiful moment. And I feel like in our Malaminate lifestyle, we never do that. We're always moving the goalpost.
Mhm.
Like, let's get accepted, then let's get straight A's, then let's graduate and do this. And so I feel like it allows you ideally to kind of pause a little bit and have those conversations about identity and about culture and community with family and loved ones. So I like that. So, you know, enjoy, which they never will do, but, you know, ideally for students.
So what about parents?
And parents, ooh,
They're the tougher
parents.
one, right?
I know they are. I mean, let's see. Same deal. Enjoy kind of the process, but take a step back. So become, and I think I heard this in your podcast, but I'm going to borrow it.
And anytime,
So
borrow
I
anything
love
that's
when-
not copyrighted.
Right? I love it. So know when you can step in and really kind of offer intervention strategies and work, and know when to kind of dip out. So I feel like become your students' like secretary. Start Excel spreadsheets and like with due dates and like help them organize the madness and the chaos that is. It's so overwhelming. There's so many kind of moments to kind of really pull your hair out. And so students really can value and benefit from helping that organizational aspect. And then I think with the writing, I think you want to let your student kind of guide them, give them that roots, give them the background, but then let them go. Let them kind of express themselves and really trust the process. I feel like, your household is going to become so quiet so quickly. And so you're going to miss them. And yeah, so kind of help them where I feel like you can help them best, which is to help organize the process and don't micromanage the process.
You know what's great is the parents that are listening here, they care so much and they're so invested in their kids' education, because think about all the other things they could be doing. They could be watching Real Housewives and they're listening to our podcast. I had to get that in. Real Housewives of Atlanta.
Yes, they can.
No, this has been.
Oh my goodness, I can't love it.
So this has been awesome, Josie. We so appreciate you coming on. Why don't you share your website, and I don't know if you're on social media or anything like that, but we can also put that up on our website as well, any of your contact information. So why don't you share, at least your website or whatever you want to share.
Perfect. Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much. So it is writeyouracceptance.com. You can find us on Instagram, Pinterest, and I am very soon launching a YouTube channel. Well, it's up, but I will start kind of releasing videos in 2 weeks. So I'm really excited about that. But yeah, writeyouracceptance.com. I am chatting with students, parents all the time. So thank you. And thank you, Mark, for kind of having me on. I really
it's been my pleasure, and I know our listeners are going to love it. So when you get the YouTube page like fully officially launched, make sure you let me know, because I'll want to make sure we get that back in the show notes. Unless you want us to put it up now, it sounds like it's kind of ready. Yes, no. Or what do you want us to do on that? Wait.
Yeah, no, I'll put it, I'll send it to you. I'll send you like the link and stuff, but yeah, it's Write Your Acceptance. It's all the same. But yeah, in kind of basically I have a few videos already up, and I'm starting to release them. Kind of, I have them scheduled. So in 2 weeks, they'll be ready to go. Which is exciting.
So listen, I'm taking you up on your promise. When I have students they visit I'm having you do your little brief tour. Because it is a hot school.
Yes.
It's a hot school.
Let me know. I will make a t-shirt.
The South Florida and the weather, and it's also strong academically. I have to let people know, though, it's not just a party school. People tell me that a lot. Isn't that a party school? And I have to debunk that myth.
I know. We've kind of, and we've tried to shake off. Yeah, a few decades ago, we were Suntan U. And so we've tried to kind of shake that off a little bit, but
takes time.
But yeah, I think it's the sunshine, South Beach, and there are a lot of draws socially. Absolutely, our kids are having fun, but the university is very, very good at kind of just making sure that the priorities are straight.
Well,
so yeah, work hard,
there
play
you go.
hard.
Listen, I wish you nothing but the best, and I look forward to meeting you in person.
Likewise, thank you so much, and thank you, your college-bound kid. This has been such a privilege. So cool.
How did you find us, by the way? I don't think I've ever asked you that.
Well, I love podcasts, usually for kind of entertainment reasons, like Serial and just other stuff. But and then I just I'm driving so much, because one of the drawbacks of Miami is Miami traffic, and so I was like, let me just kind of double dip and I always want to kind of stay engaged and stay in part of the conversation on the college process. And I mean, lo and behold, you were there on like the first search page, so you're up there.
Well, thanks again, and
it's importante. Yeah.
Take care, Josie. Thank you so much. Bye now.
Next week in the news, teenagers are more stressed than ever, and who is to blame? And we'll be in chapter 74 of 171 answers, and we're talking about admission hooks. And next week's question is from a listener who wants to know where to find the data on what states colleges accept students from. And stay tuned as Mark continues with another special guest interview next week.
So what you got going this week, Anika? What are your plans?
Well, Mark, we are moving again.
Oh, that's good.
OMG.
That's good, isn't it?
It is good.
Is
It is
this-
good. I couldn't find, my biggest fear in this whole move has been like the right school system for John, and it played itself out. So we started this is actually going to be his third move in a school, which isn't tragic. Doesn't sound as bad as it's not as bad as it sounds.
Now that's not all in the same school year, right? Was that 2 different school years?
Not in the same. No, not in the same school year. He started out in elementary. Then we started with another charter that was okay. That we thought he would go into his middle school years, but it wasn't quite the best fit. So we found a system that we're actually moving into because we've done our whole research and we think we finally got it. But it's not going to be perfect. But we got a good feeling about it. So next Friday, we're out of here.
Well, moving is like a migraine and a half, but when it's all done, it's all done. It's worth it.
Exactly. So that's why we are not tripping at all.
Awesome. Well, enjoy your week.
Thanks, you too. And that's our show. A big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. And if you found this podcast helpful, it would help us tremendously if you would subscribe and write us a review on your favorite podcast listening station. And please be sure to click the share button and send this to someone you know that could really use this information. Your College Bound Kid is produced by John Lockenbaugh. The amazing music that you hear is by Victor Allen Weeks. Artwork is by Andrea Togo, and marketing designs are by Kimberly Blass. If you want to get a copy of the book 171 Answers to the Most Asked College Admissions Questions, you can go right to 171answers.com. And if you want to have a college coaching session with Mark, you can send him a text to area code 404-664-4340.
And if you have a question or a few questions that you would like for us to answer on the show, please email us at questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. That's questions with an S at yourcollegeboundkid.com. Every week, we'll take one question and include it in the episode. We don't like your questions. We love your questions, so send them our way. And by the way, check out our website, which is just simply yourcollegeboundkid.com. Again, we thank you for tuning in, and we look forward to meeting with you again next week.